The weight you have been carrying today did not start today. It began earlier, maybe much earlier, and it found its way into the body before it found its way into words. That is not weakness. That is what the psychology of healing and recovery has been confirming for decades. The emotional charge of old pain does not live in thought alone. It lives in the nervous system, in the sleeping brain, in the chemistry that changes between midnight and dawn. And the part that changes everything. The deepest repair may happen not when you try to resolve what you carry, but when you stop trying and sleep. Welcome to Sleepy Science. Something in you is already moving toward that. The body knows the way. Close your eyes and breathe slowly. You are where recovery begins. In the quiet and the dark, where the mind releases what the day collected. And now we begin. Every night, while the world goes quiet, your brain begins a process that researchers now describe as one of the most sophisticated emotional maintenance systems in biology. Deep sleep, particularly the phase known as REM sleep, does not simply rest the mind. It selectively processes the emotional residue of waking experience, separating memory content from its associated charge. A traumatic or painful experience carries two elements: what happened, and the feeling attached to what happened. Neuroscience has found these are stored and reprocessed differently. The facts you are about to hear follow that difference, and what it means for the wounds that time alone does not seem to touch. The amygdala is the brain's threat detection center, a small, almond-shaped structure deep in the temporal lobe that tags incoming experience with emotional significance. When something painful happens, the amygdala fires intensely, encoding the event with what researchers call an affective stamp. This stamp is what makes a memory feel weighted, charged, and difficult to hold without discomfort. During waking hours, that stamp remains largely intact. The memory carries its original charge each time it surfaces. But during REM sleep, the amygdala's activity changes in a way that appears nowhere else in the brain's daily cycle. That shift is at the heart of everything that follows tonight. REM sleep was first formally described in 1953 by Eugene Azarinsky and Nathaniel Kleitman at the University of Chicago. They noticed that the sleeping brain periodically enters a state of intense neural activity, accompanied by rapid eye movements beneath closed lids. For decades, REM was associated mainly with dreaming and treated as a curiosity rather than a function. Only in the past 20 years have researchers understood it as the brain's primary emotional regulation stage, a period during which the very neurochemistry that makes fear and pain feel immediate is temporarily suspended. That understanding shifted the entire field of trauma research. One of the most important neurochemical shifts during REM sleep involves norepinephrine, sometimes called noradrenaline. This chemical is the brain's primary stress signal. It is responsible for the heightened arousal, the faster heartbeat, the sharpened attention that accompany fear and emotional pain. During most of the sleep cycle, norepinephrine levels fluctuate. But during REM sleep, they drop almost to zero. This near-complete suppression of the brain's stress chemistry creates a window that appears nowhere else in human physiology. A period of low-charge neural processing during which emotional memories can be reaccessed without their full original intensity. Matthew Walker, a neuroscientist at the University of California, Berkeley, has described REM sleep as a form of overnight therapy, a phrase that has entered the broader scientific vocabulary because it captures something precise. Unlike the blunt forgetting of ordinary memory decay, REM stage processing is selective. It does not erase the memory. It reduces the distress associated with the memory while preserving the information itself. This distinction is fundamental to understanding trauma. The goal of healing is rarely to forget what happened. It is to remember without being overwhelmed. Sleep may be the only natural process that accomplishes exactly that. The hippocampus plays a central role in this process. This seahorse-shaped structure in the medial temporal lobe encodes new experiences and consolidates them into long-term storage. During sleep, and particularly around REM, the hippocampus revisits recent emotional memories. Some researchers have proposed that this replay occurs at accelerated rates, giving the brain repeated opportunities to re-encode the memory within a neurochemical environment calmer than the one in which the event was originally experienced. Researchers describe this broader process as emotional recalibration, the brain returning to the experience on its own terms, in conditions that the waking day cannot provide. Sleep architecture, the pattern of sleep stages across a single night, is not random. A typical night cycles through light sleep, deep, slow-wave sleep, and REM sleep roughly 4 to 5 times, with each cycle lasting approximately 90 minutes. Critically, the proportion of REM sleep increases across the night. The first cycle contains relatively little REM, while the final 2 or 3 cycles contain progressively more. This means that people who wake early, or whose sleep is interrupted in the second half of the night, lose a disproportionate amount of exactly the sleep stage most associated with emotional processing. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is characterized in part by a dysfunction in exactly this system. People with PTSD show altered REM sleep architecture, reduced REM duration, fragmented REM episodes, and elevated norepinephrine levels that persist into REM periods where they should be suppressed. Research published in journals including Biological Psychiatry and Nature Reviews Neuroscience has linked these REM disruptions directly to the hallmark symptoms of PTSD: intrusive memories, emotional hyperreactivity, difficulty distinguishing past threat from present safety. The trauma appears, in part, as the sleep failing to complete its own repair. Trauma researchers have identified what they call fear extinction as a central mechanism of psychological recovery. Fear extinction is not forgetting. It is the formation of a new memory that competes with the old one. A memory that says this context is now safe, alongside the memory that says this once hurt. During waking therapy, fear extinction is effortful, slow, and susceptible to reversal. During sleep, it appears to consolidate automatically. Studies in both animal models and human neuroimaging have found that extinction learning formed during the day is stabilized and deepened during subsequent REM sleep, suggesting that sleep is not incidental to recovery, but integral to it. The first arc of tonight is this: the body carries what the mind experienced, and it does its most careful work on that weight during sleep. Not through resolution, not through understanding or insight or the right words, but through a quiet, chemical, biological process that has been operating in human beings for far longer than language has. The question that opens here: how exactly does sleep help us carry less of what once hurt? Is one. The next 90 minutes will follow slowly, fact by fact, into the mechanism that science has only recently begun to map. The prefrontal cortex, the brain's center of rational thought, emotional regulation, and long-term planning, has a complex relationship with the sleeping brain. During waking hours, the prefrontal cortex works to suppress or contextualize emotional responses generated by the amygdala. This top-down regulation is effortful and resource-dependent. It diminishes when we are tired, stressed, or overwhelmed. But during REM sleep, the prefrontal cortex remains partially active in a different way, not suppressing the amygdala, but communicating with it in a lower arousal neurochemical environment. This may be why sleep can accomplish what waking effort sometimes cannot: gentle reprocessing without the resistance that conscious attention tends to create. Dreams, researchers have argued, may be a conscious window into the emotional reprocessing that REM sleep performs. The content of dreams is not random. Studies have consistently found that emotionally significant waking events are more likely to be incorporated into subsequent dream content than neutral events. Sigmund Freud's intuition that dreams carry emotional significance was directionally correct, even if his mechanisms were wrong. Contemporary dream research suggests that dreams may reflect the brain selecting which emotional memories to reprocess, with the narrative quality of the dream, however strange or fragmented, representing the brain's attempt to integrate new emotional information with older experience. One particularly well-documented phenomenon is called sleep-dependent emotional memory consolidation. In experiments at multiple institutions, including Harvard, Berkeley, and the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, participants were shown emotionally charged images before sleep and emotionally neutral images as controls. Those who slept reported significantly reduced emotional reactivity to the charged images the following day, while their memory for the content of the images remained largely intact. Those who remained awake for the equivalent period showed no such reduction. The finding has been replicated across multiple methodologies and supports a direct causal role for sleep in reducing the emotional load of experience. Slow-wave sleep, the deep, dreamless stage that dominates the early part of the night, also plays a role in emotional processing, though a different one from REM. During slow-wave sleep, the brain replays recent experiences in a more straightforward consolidation process, transferring information from the hippocampus to the cortex for long-term storage. For traumatic memory, this stage may be where the factual record of what happened is stabilized, while REM handles the emotional charge. The interplay between these two stages, factual consolidation in deep sleep, emotional recalibration in REM, may explain why a full, uninterrupted night produces something that a partial night cannot. The stress hormone cortisol follows its own 24-hour rhythm, reaching its lowest point in the early morning hours just before dawn and rising sharply to its daily peak shortly after waking. This rhythm intersects with sleep architecture in important ways. Cortisol levels are lowest during the deep, REM-rich periods of late-night sleep, creating another layer of the low arousal environment in which emotional reprocessing occurs. Chronic stress, which elevates baseline cortisol, disrupts this rhythm, compressing the natural cortisol low and reducing the neurochemical window available for overnight emotional repair. The sleep is still happening, but the chemistry is less favorable. The vagus nerve, the long, wandering nerve that runs from the brainstem through the heart, lungs, and digestive system, is increasingly understood as a key pathway in the mind-body conversation about safety. During REM sleep, vagal tone, the level of activity in this nerve, shifts in ways that parallel the reduction in norepinephrine, contributing to the overall downregulation of the body's threat response system. Research in polyvagal theory, associated with Stephen Porges at Indiana University, has proposed that the capacity to feel safe is fundamentally physiological, and that sleep, particularly late-night REM sleep, is one of the body's primary mechanisms for restoring that physiological safety signal. Childhood trauma has a well-documented effect on sleep architecture that can persist for decades. Studies of adults with histories of early adverse experiences consistently find altered slow-wave sleep, fragmented REM, and elevated nighttime cortisol compared to those without such histories. This finding is significant in both directions. It helps explain why unresolved early trauma often feels so persistent. The repair mechanism that would normally attenuate its emotional charge has itself been compromised. And it points towards sleep as a potential site of intervention. Research published in journals including JAMA Psychiatry has found that improving sleep quality in trauma survivors is associated with measurable reductions in PTSD symptom severity. Memory reconsolidation is a process discovered relatively recently. The first clear experimental evidence dates to a 2000 paper by Karim Nader and colleagues at New York University. When a stored memory is retrieved and briefly made active again, it enters a labiline, unstable state before being restored. During this window, the memory is susceptible to modification. Sleep appears to interact with reconsolidation. Several studies have found that memories retrieved before sleep and then slept on are re-encoded with altered emotional tone, reduced in charge, more integrated with existing knowledge. The implication is that the simple act of remembering something before sleep and then sleeping may change how that memory feels. Researchers have identified specific proteins involved in the molecular mechanisms of overnight emotional processing. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, plays a role in synaptic plasticity, the strengthening and weakening of neural connections that underlies learning and memory. During sleep, BDNF expression in hippocampal neurons increases significantly. This molecular activity may be part of how sleep accomplishes the recalibration of emotional memory, not erasing connections, but adjusting their relative strength, making the connection to safety slightly stronger, the connection to alarm slightly weaker, across the thousands of synapses that encode a single complex emotional experience. The relationship between sleep and grief has been a focus of emerging research. Grief involves a particular kind of emotional memory challenge. The person is not trying to forget what happened, but trying to integrate it, to carry the loss without being continuously overwhelmed by it. Studies of bereaved individuals have found that REM sleep density The intensity of REM activity correlates with adaptation over time. Those with healthier REM sleep in the months following a loss show better psychological integration of grief compared to those with disrupted REM. Sleep does not resolve grief, but it appears to support the process by which grief gradually becomes something the person can carry. The relationship between nightmares and unprocessed trauma is bidirectional. Nightmares are not simply symptoms of trauma. They may also represent an attempt at reprocessing that has become dysregulated. In PTSD, the normal REM reprocessing of emotional memory appears to break down. Instead of the memory being replayed in a low norepinephrine environment that allows recalibration, it is replayed with norepinephrine levels still elevated, producing a re-experiencing rather than a reprocessing. The nightmare carries the original emotional charge rather than attenuating it. This finding has led to treatment approaches that target sleep directly, including imagery, rehearsal therapy, and medications that specifically reduce nighttime norepinephrine as routes to improving trauma recovery. Acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter associated with learning and memory, rises significantly during REM sleep and plays a role in the heightened hippocampal activity characteristic of that stage. The interplay between acetylcholine and norepinephrine during REM, high acetylcholine, low norepinephrine, may be neurochemically responsible for what researchers describe as a safe review state. The brain is engaged. The memory is accessible. But the alarm chemistry that would normally accompany it is suppressed. This combination appears uniquely suited to the task of re-examining emotionally charged material in a way that changes its weight without losing its content. Social connection and felt safety have measurable effects on sleep architecture. Research has found that individuals who report higher levels of perceived social support show more consolidated REM sleep and lower nighttime cortisol than those who report feeling isolated. This finding connects the relational world to the biological machinery of healing, not metaphorically, but literally. The feeling of being safe with others changes the chemistry of sleep and changes the efficiency of the emotional repair that sleep performs each night. Loneliness does not just feel painful over time. It appears to impair the body's most consistent and fundamental recovery system. Exercise has a well-documented positive effect on sleep architecture, including increased slow-wave sleep and improved REM continuity. For trauma survivors, physical activity has an additional dimension. It appears to help regulate the hyperactivated stress response that chronic trauma instills, making the nervous system more capable of downregulating at night. A 2023 meta-analysis in the journal Mental Health and Physical Activity found that moderate aerobic exercise, even as little as 20 minutes, 3 times a week, significantly improved sleep quality in individuals with trauma histories, with effects on REM specifically that were comparable to some pharmacological interventions. The pattern from the first 25 facts is this: sleep is not passive in the face of what has been carried. The brain does not simply rest when the day ends. It turns toward what the day deposited with something like care, working through it in the one environment where the chemistry of alarm is absent. The question that opened this hour, how sleep helps us carry less of what once hurt, already has a partial answer, by returning to the memory without the original fear. But what happens when the wound is older than a single night? What happens when the carrying has been going on for years. That is where the next arc begins. The quiet you are finding here has been finding you back. A soft subscribe helps another sleepless mind discover this space too. Take a slow breath with us now, one sleepy soul at a time. Right now, in the architecture of your nervous system, something is already different from how it was when you lay down. The norepinephrine, the chemical that carries alarm through the body, has been falling since the moment your eyes closed. Not because anything is resolved, because the system knows this part of the night. It has been here before. The question that just opened: what happens when the carrying has lasted years? When a single night's repair is not enough, lives in what the nervous system has learned to expect, in whether it has learned to trust that the floor will fall. Notice your breath. Notice that the body is already moving toward its answer, whether the mind has caught up or not. Now, we continue. Chronic trauma. Trauma that accumulates over time or that has not been processed, creates neurological patterns that differ from acute, single-event trauma in important ways. The brain of someone carrying long-term emotional pain shows increased baseline amygdala reactivity, reduced hippocampal volume in some studies, and altered connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and limbic structures that regulate emotional response. These are not permanent features, but they represent the nervous system having adapted to an environment it perceived as persistently dangerous. The question for sleep science becomes: can gradual, consistent sleep support begin to reverse these adaptations? The research is cautiously optimistic, and it is where tonight continues. The hippocampus is sensitive to chronic stress in ways that directly affect its role in emotional memory processing. Prolonged elevated cortisol has been associated in research with reduced neurogenesis in the hippocampus, the generation of new neurons that may underlie the formation of new associations. This is one proposed mechanism by which chronic stress could impair the brain's ability to build new safety associations alongside old danger ones. Research also suggests that neurogenesis in the hippocampus may be among the structures most responsive to improved sleep quality, exercise, and reduced stress, pointing toward a degree of reversibility that was not widely accepted 2 decades ago. Trauma-focused therapy modalities, including eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing, known as EMDR, and prolonged exposure therapy, have been found to work in part by facilitating the same reprocessing that sleep performs naturally. EMDR uses bilateral sensory stimulation, while the patient briefly holds a traumatic memory in mind, creating conditions that some researchers have compared neurochemically to REM sleep. The memory is active, but the alarm chemistry is partially regulated. The therapeutic effect may be, in part, an artificial induction of the state the sleeping brain enters naturally, suggesting that sleep and certain therapies may be working on the same underlying mechanism. A 2019 study at the Sleep and Cognition Neuroimaging Laboratory in Amsterdam found that overnight sleep selectively consolidated fear extinction, learning in a way that generalized to new contexts, meaning that the sense of safety formed during a therapeutic session in one environment was more likely to transfer to other environments after sleep. This generalization effect is clinically significant. One of the persistent challenges in trauma treatment is that safety learned in the therapist's office does not always follow the person home. Sleep, the study suggested, may be part of the mechanism by which it does. The body holds the record of what the mind experienced. This insight, articulated by psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk in his widely read work, has a basis in the neuroscience of somatic memory. Emotional trauma is encoded not only in the explicit, narrative memory that the hippocampus manages, but in implicit, procedural systems that govern posture, muscle tension, autonomic nervous system tone, and visceral sensation. These somatic traces are less accessible to conscious reflection and less directly targeted by talk-based therapies. Research is beginning to explore whether the body scanning, tension-releasing processes that occur in deep sleep, including slow-wave stages, may address somatic memory in ways that waking intervention cannot easily reach. Sleep spindles, brief bursts of neural oscillatory activity observed during stage 2 non-REM sleep, were once considered relatively minor features of sleep architecture. More recent research has elevated their significance. Sleep spindles appear to be involved in the consolidation of declarative memory, but also in the gating of sensory input. They may reduce the sensitivity of the sleeping brain to incoming stimulation, protecting the depth and continuity of sleep. In individuals with anxiety disorders and PTSD, spindle density is often reduced, meaning the sleep that does occur is more easily disrupted and less protective of the processing that deeper stages perform. The thalamus, a deep brain structure that serves as a relay station for sensory information, plays a role in the generation of sleep spindles and in regulating what reaches the cortex during sleep. Research has found that traumatized individuals show altered thalamic activity during sleep that may contribute to their heightened nighttime startle response and sleep fragmentation. The thalamus, operating as a gatekeeper, appears less effective at filtering non-threatening sensory information in those with chronic trauma histories, keeping the sleeping brain in a state of partial vigilance rather than allowing the full-down regulation of arousal that effective emotional reprocessing requires. Hyperarousal, the persistent state of heightened physiological alertness characteristic of chronic stress and PTSD, does not switch off at bedtime. Heart rate variability, a measure of the autonomic nervous system's flexibility, is consistently reduced in trauma survivors during both waking and sleeping hours. Lower heart rate variability indicates reduced capacity to modulate between activation and rest, a narrower range of physiological response that affects the depth and quality of sleep across all stages. Emerging research suggests that practices that improve heart rate variability, including slow-paced breathing, yoga, and certain meditation techniques, also improve sleep quality and trauma symptom severity, reinforcing the feedback loop between body regulation and emotional repair. The concept of window of tolerance, developed by Dan Siegel and widely used in trauma-informed clinical practice, describes the optimal zone of arousal within which the nervous system can process experience without either shutting down or becoming overwhelmed. Sleep can be understood as the body's attempt to return to and maintain this window for an extended period each night. When chronic trauma has narrowed the window during waking hours, it also narrows it during sleep, producing the fragmented, hypervigilant sleep architecture that trauma survivors often report. Expanding the window during waking hours. Through therapy, exercise, and social support, appears to expand it during sleep as well. The relationship between alcohol and trauma is partly mediated through sleep. Many trauma survivors use alcohol to facilitate sleep onset, finding that it quiets the hyper-aroused nervous system enough to fall asleep. However, alcohol significantly suppresses REM sleep, the very stage most central to emotional reprocessing. The short-term relief it provides comes at the cost of the overnight repair that could, over time, reduce the hyper-arousal it was used to manage. This mechanism helps explain the clinical pattern in which alcohol use in trauma survivors tends to perpetuate rather than resolve the underlying emotional dysregulation, and why trauma-focused sleep treatment has become an independent focus of addiction medicine. Oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone or trust molecule, has been found to play a role in sleep quality and in the modulation of fear response. Studies have found that intranasal oxytocin administration reduces amygdala reactivity to threatening stimuli and improves aspects of sleep architecture, including REM continuity. Naturally occurring oxytocin, produced through physical touch, felt social connection, and secure attachment relationships, may therefore influence both the quality of sleep and the efficiency of emotional reprocessing during sleep. The neurochemistry of attachment and the neurochemistry of healing overnight appear to overlap in ways that are only beginning to be mapped. The pineal gland produces melatonin, the hormone that signals darkness to the body and initiates the cascade of physiological changes associated with sleep onset. Melatonin does not itself cause sleep, but it shifts the body's internal timing system, the circadian clock, toward nighttime physiology. Disruption of melatonin rhythms through artificial light exposure, irregular sleep schedules, or shift work has been associated with impaired REM sleep and elevated markers of psychological distress for trauma survivors, for whom sleep architecture is already vulnerable. Circadian disruption adds an additional layer of interference with the overnight repair processes that are already compromised. Research on epigenetics, the study of how experience changes gene expression without altering DNA sequence, has found that trauma can produce heritable changes in stress response biology. Studies of Holocaust survivors and their children found altered cortisol response patterns in the children, suggesting that severe early trauma can modify the expression of stress-related genes in ways that affect subsequent generations. More recent work has examined whether interventions that reduce chronic stress, including improved sleep, can reverse some of these epigenetic modifications. The evidence is preliminary but suggests that the effects of trauma, encoded at the molecular level, are not entirely fixed. The insula, a cortical structure involved in intercepting body states, including the felt sense of physical and emotional pain, shows altered activity in individuals with trauma histories. During sleep, the insula's engagement with the body's internal landscape continues in modified form, and researchers have proposed that one function of sleep may be the gradual recalibration of interceptive sensitivity, reducing the hair trigger quality that trauma instills in the body's internal monitoring systems. This would represent healing not in the cognitive realm of memory and meaning, but in the physical realm of how it feels to inhabit the body, a dimension of recovery that waking awareness cannot easily reach. There is a quality to what sleep offers that is different in kind from what waking effort provides. Waking processing of trauma requires will, attention, regulation, resources that are finite and frequently depleted in those who most need to use them. Sleep asks for none of that. It requires only that the body be still and the environment reasonably safe. The repair it performs is unconditional in a way that therapeutic effort is not. Tonight's science has been, in one sense, making the case for something very quiet. That underneath every act of deliberate healing, the body has been doing its own work. For every hour you have ever slept, there's a quietness settling in now, and the facts have been finding their way into the body alongside the mind. Take a slow breath. Notice the weight of your body, the way it presses gently downward, the way it knows how to be still. We're moving through something careful tonight. The science of what happens in the dark, while the careful part of you is resting. Let's continue. The vagal brake, a specific mechanism of the parasympathetic nervous system involving the myelinated branch of the vagus nerve, allows rapid, flexible modulation of cardiac output in response to perceived safety. When the vagal brake is engaged, heart rate slows and the system enters a state of social engagement and calm. During deep sleep, the vagal brake is consistently engaged for extended periods, producing the sustained parasympathetic state that allows the body's repair systems, including emotional reprocessing, to operate without interruption. For individuals whose vagal brake has been trained by chronic threat to remain disengaged, quality sleep represents one of the few consistent opportunities for its restoration. The relationship between the gut microbiome and emotional well-being has emerged as one of the more notable areas of contemporary neuroscience. The gut-brain axis, the bidirectional communication network connecting the gastrointestinal system to the central nervous system via the vagus nerve, appears to influence mood, anxiety, and stress reactivity through the production of neurotransmitter precursors and inflammatory signals. Sleep and the gut microbiome also interact. Disrupted sleep alters microbiome composition, and altered microbiome composition, in turn, affects sleep quality. For trauma survivors, whose stress physiology is already dysregulated, this interdependence represents an additional feedback loop and an additional pathway through which sustained quality sleep supports overall recovery. The body's inflammatory response, a key part of the immune system, is closely regulated by sleep. During deep, slow-wave sleep, anti-inflammatory cytokines are released and pro-inflammatory markers are reduced. Chronic trauma, like chronic stress, is associated with elevated baseline inflammation, which in turn impairs both sleep quality and cognitive function, including the emotional regulatory capacity of the prefrontal cortex. This creates a cycle. Trauma elevates inflammation. Inflammation impairs sleep. Impaired sleep fails to reduce inflammation. And reduced inflammation impairs emotional regulation. Recent research has focused on breaking this cycle through sleep-targeted interventions as the most accessible entry point for trauma-related inflammatory dysregulation. Nighttime heart rate, one of the most accessible physiological measures of sleep quality, has been found to correlate with psychological outcomes in trauma survivors. Individuals whose nighttime heart rate naturally drops to lower levels during sleep show better emotional regulation the following day, faster recovery from stressful events, and lower long-term PTSD symptom severity. Wearable technology has made continuous nighttime heart rate monitoring accessible to general consumers. And some researchers have proposed that tracking nighttime recovery could become a practical tool for individuals monitoring their own progress in trauma recovery. A direct window into the nocturnal physiological processes that daytime observation cannot capture. The timing of sleep within the 24-hour cycle matters. Research on circadian biology has found that sleeping during the biological night, the period aligned with darkness, produces different physiological outcomes than sleeping during the biological day, even when total sleep duration is the same. Night-aligned sleep produces more natural cortisol suppression, more efficient REM cycling, and more complete autonomic recovery. For individuals with irregular schedules, shift workers, new parents, those with anxiety-driven insomnia, the disruption of biological night sleep may compound the already compromised sleep quality associated with trauma, reducing the efficiency of overnight emotional repair even when sleep is occurring. The transition from wakefulness to sleep, the hypnagogic state, is a period of particular neurological interest. As the brain descends from alert beta wave activity through alpha rhythms toward the theta waves of early sleep, a brief window opens in which loosely associative, imagery-rich thinking occurs. Some researchers have proposed that this hypnagogic period represents an early stage of the integration process that REM will later complete, a first pass through the day's unresolved emotional content before deeper stages of processing begin. It may be why lying quietly in the dark, even without sleep, can sometimes bring unexpected emotional clarity or the slow relaxation of a tension that had no apparent reason to release. The anterior cingulate cortex, a region at the front of the brain involved in error detection, conflict monitoring, and the regulation of emotional response, shows characteristic changes in activity during REM sleep. During waking hours, the anterior cingulate helps signal when emotional experience conflicts with the individual's sense of safety or self-concept. During REM sleep, its activity shifts in a way that may allow the emotional memory to be processed without triggering the full defensive response that it would generate in waking. This partial disengagement of the conflict monitor may be one reason that REM processing can accomplish what direct waking attention to traumatic memory sometimes cannot. The relationship between narrative and healing has a neurological dimension. The human brain's default mode network, a set of midline structures active during rest, self-reflection, and social cognition, is involved both in the construction of personal narrative and in the processing of self-referential emotional experience. During REM sleep, the default mode network remains significantly active, and dream content often has the quality of narrative. Events, characters, and emotional arcs. Researchers have proposed that REM stage dreaming may be one mechanism by which the brain constructs and revises the narrative scaffolding around traumatic experience, not resolving it, but gradually recontextualizing it within a larger story that includes what came after. Sensory motor therapy and somatic experiencing. Body-oriented approaches to trauma treatment emphasize completing physical responses that were initiated but could not be expressed at the time of the traumatic event. There is evidence that sleep supports a parallel process in the autonomic nervous system. During slow-wave sleep, the body's stress response circuitry may gradually discharge residual activation that was not fully resolved during waking. Through small movements, shifts in muscle tone, and autonomic fluctuations that are normal features of healthy sleep. Sleep researchers have begun to map these phenomena more precisely, and the intersection of somatic trauma approaches with sleep science represents one of the more promising emerging areas of trauma-informed medicine. Halfway through the science of tonight, attention becomes visible that the first 50 facts have been quietly approaching. Sleep supports emotional healing. This is well supported. But sleep is also the very thing that trauma most reliably disrupts. The person who most needs overnight repair is often the person least able to access it. Hypervigilant, unable to feel safe in darkness and stillness, waking repeatedly in the night, losing the late cycle REM that carries the most emotional weight. What does science say for the one in that position? For the person who understands what sleep could do and still cannot reach it? That is the question the second half of tonight follows. What just opened? The question of what happens when the repair system is there but cannot be accessed is not only a research question. You may be carrying a version of that right now. Something that knows, somewhere, that rest is possible and still finds the dark unfamiliar, the stillness hard. That is not failure. That is what the nervous system does when it has spent a long time in a world where stillness was not safe. Notice your breath. Notice that you are here, and the night is quiet around you, and nothing is being asked of you. The body is learning, even now. Now we continue. The treatment of trauma-related insomnia has increasingly shifted away from sedative hypnotics toward approaches that directly address the hyperarousal underlying the sleep disruption. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, GBT, is now considered the first-line treatment for chronic insomnia by most clinical guidelines. In trauma populations, CBTI has been adapted to include components that address the hypervigilance, safety associations, and threat monitoring behaviors that specifically interfere with sleep in trauma survivors, going beyond the sleep hygiene interventions that, alone, are rarely sufficient for individuals whose nervous system experiences the bedroom as a potential threat environment. The simple fact of lying in the dark represents a kind of sensory environment that the nervous system must learn to read as safe. For some people, particularly those with early trauma histories or histories of nighttime-specific experiences of threat or neglect, the darkness, stillness, and silence of the sleep environment have become conditioned cues for vigilance rather than rest. The process of relearning the sleep environment as safe is slow, but it is a genuine neurological process. The formation of new associations that gradually compete with old ones. Night by night, the nervous system updates its predictions. The learning is cumulative. Imagery, rehearsal therapy, a treatment specifically developed for trauma-related nightmares, involves rewriting the content of recurrent nightmares while awake, and then rehearsing the new version through deliberate mental imagery. The treatment has shown significant effectiveness in multiple randomized controlled trials, reducing nightmare frequency and severity in PTSD populations. Its mechanism of action is thought to involve the same reconsolidation process described earlier. The nightmare memory is activated and then exposed to new content in a partially deactivated fear state, allowing the new content to be incorporated into the stored version. Sleep following the rehearsal consolidates the new narrative, gradually displacing the original. The neuroscience of safety is, in some ways, the neuroscience of sleep. The nervous system's assessment of environmental safety determines whether the physiological cascade that initiates sleep will be allowed to proceed. The brainstem's locus coeruleus, the primary source of norepinephrine in the brain, whose quieting is so central to REM stage emotional reprocessing, remains active as long as the nervous system detects potential threat, creating the felt sense of safety. Not just the cognitive knowledge that one is safe, but the embodied, physiological experience of it, is the primary biological prerequisite for the kind of sleep that heals. Temperature plays an underappreciated role in sleep initiation and architecture. The body's core temperature must drop by approximately 1 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit to initiate sleep, a process facilitated by the dilation of blood vessels in the hands and feet that allows heat to dissipate. Research has found that people whose core temperature drops more rapidly at sleep onset show faster sleep onset and more efficient REM cycling. For individuals with anxiety and hyperarousal, core temperature drops more slowly, providing a physiological explanation for the difficulty in letting go that is often experienced as purely psychological, but is tightly coupled to body temperature regulation. The role of narrative coherence in trauma recovery has been a significant focus of clinical psychology. Research by James Pennebaker at the University of Texas found that writing about traumatic experiences, constructing a coherent account of what happened and what it meant, was associated with improved immune function and better psychological outcomes. The mechanism proposed involves the left hemisphere's language systems imposing structure on raw emotional material. Sleep may perform an analogous integration. During REM, language-associated regions contribute to the narrative quality of dreams, potentially offering a nightly opportunity for the brain to write and quietly revise its own story. The relationship between trust and sleep has been explored in attachment research. John Bowlby's attachment theory proposed that the felt sense of safety, the condition in which the nervous system downregulates from threat monitoring to rest, develops through repeated experiences of a reliable caregiver providing comfort when distress occurs. This early relational learning shapes the nervous system's baseline capacity for safety, including its capacity to allow the vulnerability of sleep. Adults with secure attachment histories show more consolidated sleep and lower nighttime cortisol than those with insecure attachment, tracing a direct line from early relational experience to the chemistry of overnight healing. The prefrontal cortex's capacity to regulate the amygdala, to contextualize emotional response, distinguish past threat from present safety, and maintain perspective during arousal, is significantly impaired by sleep deprivation. Even a single night of poor sleep reduces this regulatory capacity measurably. For chronic trauma survivors, whose prefrontal amygdala regulation is already compromised during waking hours, the additional impairment from poor sleep creates a compounding effect. Less sleep leads to less emotional regulation, which leads to more distress, which makes sleep more difficult. The entry point into this cycle can be anywhere. but emerging clinical consensus is increasingly pointing towards sleep as the most tractable first target. Mindfulness-based interventions have shown consistent effectiveness for both trauma symptoms and sleep quality in ways that appear mechanistically related. Mindfulness practice. The deliberate, non-judgmental observation of present-moment experience has been found to reduce amygdala reactivity, increase prefrontal limbic connectivity, improve sleep architecture, and reduce nighttime cortisol. A 2024 meta-analysis in Sleep Medicine Reviews, covering more than 60 trials, found that mindfulness-based therapy for insomnia outperformed sleep hygiene education on virtually every measured outcome, with particularly robust effects in trauma-affected populations. The pathway appears to run through the nervous system's capacity for present-moment safety, the same foundation that underlies both effective sleep and effective trauma recovery. Chronic pain and trauma are frequently comorbid conditions that interact through overlapping neurobiological pathways. Both involve sensitized pain processing systems, altered inflammatory responses, and disrupted sleep architecture. Research has found that improving sleep quality in individuals with comorbid chronic pain and trauma history leads to reductions in pain sensitivity, measured as an increase in pain tolerance thresholds, suggesting that the anti-inflammatory and nervous system regulatory effects of better sleep extend to the physical dimensions of suffering as well. The night does not distinguish cleanly between the emotional wound and the physical one. It addresses both, through the same underlying biology of repair. A phenomenon called sleep homeostasis ensures that the pressure to sleep accumulates during waking hours through the gradual buildup of adenosine in the brain. The longer one has been awake, the higher the adenosine concentration and the stronger the drive to sleep. Adenosine is the chemical that caffeine blocks, which is why caffeine reduces sleepiness without eliminating accumulated sleep debt. For trauma survivors with insomnia, this homeostatic pressure is often intact even when sleep initiation fails. The body is driving towards sleep. The nervous system's vigilance is resisting it. Understanding that sleep pressure is physiological and cumulative can help reorient the relationship with sleep from struggle towards surrender. The glymphatic system, a network of fluid channels surrounding blood vessels in the brain that research suggests is most active during slow-wave sleep, may perform clearance of metabolic waste products overnight. These include amyloid beta and tau proteins, which accumulate with insufficient sleep and are associated with neurodegenerative disease risk. The proposed role in overnight brain health extends further, maintaining the metabolic environment in which neuronal function, including the emotional processing of REM sleep, occurs. A brain in a well-maintained metabolic state performs every function, including emotional recovery, more readily. The concept of earned security in adult attachment research describes the process by which individuals who began life with insecure attachment can develop, through subsequent relationships and experiences, a nervous system capacity for safety that was not originally established. Sleep science offers a parallel concept: the traumatized nervous system that has learned to distrust the dark can, through consistent experience of safe nights, gradually update its predictions. The nervous system is predictive. It generates expectations based on prior experience and adjusts them when evidence accumulates. Each quiet night that ends without harm is data, The update is slow, but it is real. Physical environment significantly influences the nervous system's capacity to enter the sleep state associated with emotional reprocessing. Consistent schedules, darkness, cool temperatures, and low ambient noise all reduce the sensory input that the threat monitoring brain must assess before allowing downregulation. For trauma survivors, environmental predictability carries additional weight. A space that is consistent, familiar, and within one's control provides the sensory conditions for safety that the system requires before it can move from vigilance to rest. Small environmental changes that increase the felt safety of the sleep space have been found to have measurable effects on sleep architecture that exceed their apparent simplicity. The breath is the one physiological parameter fully accessible to conscious control and simultaneously part of the autonomic nervous system. Slow, diaphragmatic breathing, typically 4 to 6 breaths per minute, compared to the normal waking rate of 12 to 20, activates the vagal brake, reduces sympathetic arousal, and initiates the cascade associated with relaxation. Research has found that slow breathing before sleep accelerates sleep onset and improves slow-wave sleep quality in both healthy populations and those with anxiety and trauma histories. The breath is available always, without cost or equipment. A direct lever on the chemistry that either permits or obstructs overnight repair. The concept of neurosequential development, articulated by Bruce Perry at the Neurosequential Network, emphasizes that trauma interventions work best when they address the brain's lower regulatory structures, the brainstem and midbrain, governing basic bodily states, before engaging the cortical structures supporting reflection and narrative. Sleep is, in one sense, a neurosequential intervention. It addresses the system from the bottom up, beginning with arousal regulation that makes all other processing possible. This is why sleep improvement is increasingly placed early in integrated trauma treatment models, not as an adjunct, but as the ground from which the real work becomes possible. Research on resilience has consistently found that certain factors predict better outcomes following traumatic experience. Social support is the most robustly established predictor. Physical activity is among the most consistently replicated. Sleep quality appears with increasing frequency as a third factor, not only as an outcome of resilience, but as a mechanism underlying it. The physiological state of the person the morning after a traumatic event, shaped directly by the quality of the intervening sleep, affects their neurobiological trajectory in measurable ways. The inflammatory markers, the cortisol rhythm, the prefrontal amygdala connectivity that will determine how the days ahead unfold. The concept of post-traumatic growth, the observation that some individuals report not just recovery from trauma, but a meaningful positive transformation in their relationship to life. Values, or self-understanding, has been examined in relation to sleep. Research by psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun, who developed the concept, found that post-traumatic growth is associated with deliberate cognitive processing of the traumatic experience. The kind of reflective engagement that draws on the cognitive clarity and emotional regulation that adequate sleep supports. Growth is not a consequence of suffering alone. It appears to require the neurobiological capacity for reintegration that suffering alone, without adequate rest, compromise, Music has well-documented effects on sleep architecture. Slow tempo music, typically 60 to 80 beats per minute, is associated with reduced heart rate, lower cortisol, slower respiration, and improved sleep onset and continuity. For trauma survivors, music may carry an additional benefit. Auditory rhythm has been found to directly engage the brainstem's timing circuits, providing a structured sensory input that the nervous system can synchronize with, a form of external co-regulation that does not require human presence. This may be why many people with trauma histories find musical accompaniment to sleep particularly effective. It gives the nervous system something safe and predictable to follow. REM sleep increases in response to emotionally significant experience. Studies have found that individuals who undergo emotionally demanding events, including positive ones, not only traumatic, show elevated REM density in subsequent nights. The brain appears to allocate more overnight processing time to experience that carries greater emotional weight. This upregulation is adaptive. For someone in early trauma recovery, actively engaging with difficult material in therapy or journaling, the increased REM demand, and any disrupted sleep it produces may represent the system working harder rather than failing. The disruption, in that context, is the repair. The relationship between writing and sleep has been studied in the context of pre-sleep cognitive activity. Research by Michael Scullin at Baylor University found that writing a specific to-do list before bed, rather than writing about the day's events, was associated with significantly faster sleep onset. Offloading planning concerns onto paper appeared to reduce cognitive load by signaling to the brain that what needed holding had been captured. For individuals who find intrusive thoughts or unresolved concerns are primary obstacles to sleep onset, structured pre-sleep writing may offer a straightforward and accessible intervention. The serotonin system interacts with the sleep system in ways that have direct implications for trauma recovery. Serotonin is the precursor to melatonin, and its availability during the day influences melatonin production and sleep onset at night. Many antidepressants targeting serotonin, particularly selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, suppress REM sleep in ways that sometimes impair emotional processing, even as they improve mood. This pharmacological complexity underlines the significance of the overall sleep system in trauma treatment and has led to growing interest in medications that improve sleep quality without REM suppression as adjuncts to ongoing therapy. The question of what children need to process early adverse experience has a sleep dimension that pediatric medicine is increasingly recognizing. Sleep disruption in children is among the earliest and most sensitive indicators of psychological stress. Changes in sleep architecture often precede or accompany anxiety symptoms, behavioral dysregulation, and trauma-related difficulties. Conversely, protecting and improving sleep quality in children who have experienced adverse events has been found to buffer subsequent psychological symptoms, not by eliminating the impact of the experience, but by preserving the neurobiological capacity for recovery that adequate childhood sleep supports. The body knows what it needs, even before the child can say what happened. The concept of safe enough, rather than completely safe, may be the more realistic standard for the traumatized nervous system attempting to access restorative sleep. Complete safety is a standard that a hypervigilant nervous system is structurally unable to confirm. It is designed to find reasons for concern. The neuroscience of sleep suggests a more practical target, reducing perceived threat to a level that allows the inhibitory systems, the vagal brake, prefrontal regulation, norepinephrine, suppression, to operate. This is a physiological state, and it can be approached through the accumulation of consistent, manageable experiences of partial safety that gradually recalibrate the system's baseline. What the first 75 facts have assembled is this: the body has its own theory of healing, one that does not require understanding, or language, or the courage to look directly at what was carried. It requires only stillness, darkness, and the accumulation of nights in which nothing further was asked. The role of REM sleep in detaching emotional charge from memory is not a metaphor. It is a mechanism, and the remaining facts carry a different quality. They follow what that mechanism means. In the dark, for anyone who has ever wanted to set something down and not yet known how, you might be feeling tired now. That's perfectly fine. Breathe slowly. Feel the settling. The nervous system moves in cycles, like the tide, out toward vigilance, in toward rest, out and in again, across every night of every year. You are in the inward part of that cycle now. You don't need to hold on to anything. The repair is not something you do. It is something the body does when the conditions allow it. Let the conditions allow it. We're almost there now. The brain that wakes from a night of good sleep is measurably different from the brain that lay down. Emotional reactivity is lower. Prefrontal regulation is stronger. The threshold for perceived threat has risen. The capacity for empathy, for extending to others the patience that good sleep extends to the self, is restored. The difference is not felt dramatically. It is felt as a quiet, slightly increased ease with being alive. The body does not forget what happened to it, but it stores old wounds differently after enough good nights. The emotional charge, the alarm that made the past feel present, fades gradually, not through effort, but through the slow, faithful work of the sleeping brain returning, again and again, to what was carried. Over time, the memory remains. Only the weight of it changes. There is a word in neuroscience: extinction, for the process by which a fear response gradually weakens in the absence of the original threat. Sleep deepens extinction. Each night that ends safely writes a small correction into the system's model of the world. The corrections accumulate. The world slowly becomes, for the nervous system, a less dangerous place. REM sleep treats emotional memory with something that functions like compassion. It returns to the experience, but without the alarm. It holds the memory in a state of reduced charge, not erasing it, not resolving it, but softening its edges until it can be held without overwhelming the system that carries it. Night after night, the softening continues, quietly, without announcement. The sleep that comes easily is a gift the body gives itself. The sleep that comes hard-won, after years of hypervigilance, after learning that darkness can be trusted, after the slow accumulation of safe nights, that sleep is something else entirely. It is the nervous system revising its oldest and deepest assumptions about the world. Each such night is evidence that the revision is possible. Cortisol drops during the night. Norepinephrine drops. Heart rate slows. The muscles release tension held since morning. Each of these is a small act of physiological trust. The body agreeing, for a few hours, to be unguarded. For someone who has not felt unguarded in a long time, each such night is a form of practice. And practice, over time, becomes a new kind of normal. The hippocampus replays the day while you sleep, but it does not replay it as it happened. It abstracts. It pattern matches. It finds what connects this experience to older ones, and quietly begins the work of integration. Not understanding in the cognitive sense, but the softer process of placing new experience inside the larger story the body is always telling itself about what the world is. Trauma holds time. Events that happened years or decades ago can feel, in the right conditions, as present and immediate as the moment of their occurrence. Sleep, across enough nights, loosens that hold, not by moving the events to the past, but by changing the emotional response that made the past feel permanent. The events remain. Their grip on the present slowly releases. The glymphatic system clears the debris of the day, the molecular byproducts of a brain that worked hard and felt much. In the morning, the brain is cleaner, not cleared of memory, cleared of the metabolic residue that accumulated around it. Lighter, in a literal, biochemical sense. The clearing makes room for what follows, for the next day and whatever it brings. There is no moment in the sleep cycle at which the body stops caring about what the mind experienced. Even in the deepest stages of slow-wave sleep, the neural architecture is engaged with the day's residue, sorting, consolidating, finding where things belong. The night is not a pause in the process of recovery. It is its most consistent and unconditional chapter. It requires nothing of you except your stillness. Safety is the prerequisite and the product of restorative sleep. The system enters the sleep state more readily when it feels safe. And when sleep proceeds well, it makes the system more capable of feeling safe the following day. This is the positive feedback loop that trauma disrupts and that careful healing slowly restores. Each quiet night is both a result of progress and a cause of it. The breath changes during deep sleep. Slower, more rhythmic, more even than any breathing produced by deliberate effort. The body, left to itself, finds a rhythm it could not maintain while conscious and trying. There is something worth sitting with in that. The most healing breath is not the one you control. It is the one that happens when you finally stop trying to manage it. Each night offers a partial reset, not a full one, not an erasure of what has been accumulated, but a genuine biological recalibration. The nervous system that wakes is not the same as the one that lay down. It has processed. It has cleared. It has, in some small measure, repaired what the previous waking hours demanded of it. The brain's emotional regulation improves with practice. Not only the practice of therapy or mindfulness, but the practice of sleeping. Each night of restorative sleep strengthens the prefrontal limbic pathways that support the capacity to feel fully without being overwhelmed. The nightly practice is quiet and invisible, but it accumulates in the same way as any other form of training. Tenderness is not a weakness the nervous system has to overcome. It is the signal that something mattered. The task of healing is not to become less tender, but to become able to hold the tenderness without the alarm that once accompanied it. Sleep, each night, works on exactly that. The alarm, not the tenderness. The tenderness is not the wound. The tenderness remains. What heals is the fear around it. The literature on recovery from chronic trauma consistently identifies time as a factor. Not because time alone heals, but because time allows the accumulation of the very experiences that do. Safe nights. A nervous system gradually learning that safety is possible. Evidence accruing slowly in the dark. Time provides the opportunity. Sleep uses it. Night by night, without announcement or fanfare, the calibration shifts. There is a particular quality to the sleep of those who are beginning to feel safer than they have in a long time. A depth, an uninterruptedness, a mornings that arrive, slowly quality that those who have moved through the hardest parts of recovery recognize without needing to name it. It is not dramatic. It is the body quietly, steadily acknowledging that something has changed. The nervous system is not fixed. This is among the most important things neuroscience has established in the past 3 decades. It is plastic, constantly revising its architecture in response to experience. Every safe night revises it. Every morning that begins from rest rather than alarm revises it. The revision is slow, but it is real, and it is ongoing. What the body needs, at the most fundamental level, is not complex. It needs rest in a context that feels safe enough to allow the repair systems to operate. Everything else, the therapy, the understanding, the gradual reclaiming of ordinary life, happens more readily from that foundation. Sleep is not the whole of healing, but it is close to its floor. The darkness that once felt dangerous can become, over enough safe nights, the most familiar and trustworthy part of the day. This is not a metaphor. It is a neurological process. The slow reassignment of darkness from threat cue to rest cue, driven by accumulated evidence, encoded in the same associative structures that learned the fear. The same brain that learned to be afraid can learn that this particular dark, this particular quiet, is safe. Healing is rarely the moment something resolves. It is more often the accumulation of moments in which the body is allowed to do what it knows how to do, in conditions that permit it. Sleep is the body's oldest and most practiced form of self-repair. Every night you have ever slept, even the difficult ones, the system has been working, making small corrections, storing quiet evidence, adjusting the calibration of what is safe. The emotional memory that once overwhelmed can become, across enough REM cycles, simply a memory, still present, still part of the story, but no longer carrying the charge that made the past feel like the present. This is what the neuroscience of overnight emotional processing describes. This is what enough good sleep, accumulated over enough time, can do. The nervous system wants to heal. This is not a spiritual claim. It is biological. the brain allocates significant metabolic resources each night to the repair of what the day damaged. It sends the hippocampus back to replay. It quiets the norepinephrine. It gives the amygdala a period of low-charge review. The system is oriented toward recovery. What it needs, more than anything, is the conditions that allow that orientation to proceed. You are lying in the dark right now. Your breathing has slowed. Your muscles have softened. The temperature of your body is falling gently toward the threshold where sleep becomes easy and natural. This, exactly this, is the condition the nervous system has been waiting for, all along. The repair is not waiting to begin. It has been happening across every quiet moment you have allowed tonight. The answer is not a scientific one. It is this: the pain was real, and it was carried faithfully, and the body never stopped working to release it. In every night of sleep, in every hour of darkness, in the chemical quiet that falls over the amygdala when the world grows still. You did not have to do anything to deserve that repair. It was already yours. It was always yours. 100 facts ago, we were asking how sleep reaches the emotional weight of what has been carried. Now the answer has a mechanism. REM's norepinephrine floor. The hippocampus returning to what hurt at a frequency too fast for alarm. The amygdala held in a bath of low-stress chemistry that exists nowhere else in the human day. We followed the fear extinction pathways, the new memories forming alongside old ones, the nervous system revising its predictions, night by night, in the direction of safety. What began as a question about forgetting became something closer to an answer about release. The night was never indifferent to what you carried. It was always working on it. REM sleep does not erase what happened. It changes the relationship between the memory and the alarm, separating what was experienced from the charge that made it unbearable. What you carry tonight is something the sleeping brain already knows how to meet. It has been meeting it, faithfully, for every night of your life. Let everything that is still moving in you slow now. The thoughts that are still circling, let them circle at a greater and greater distance, like birds over still water, unhurried, unthreatening. You are not required to resolve anything tonight. The repair that happens here does not need your attention to proceed. It only needs your stillness. And you are already still. Rest here now, in the body that knows how to heal, in the dark that is learning to be safe, in the quiet that has been yours all along. Tonight, this quiet, the science of healing and deep sleep settling around you, belongs to you. A gentle like or subscribe helps another tired soul find this space too. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. But there's no need to do anything now. Nothing at all. You've traveled far tonight. You can allow these thoughts of healing and deep sleep to fade now. Like the last tension, leaving a muscle that finally remembered how to release, leaving only a soft and settled calm behind. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier, as if the ground beneath you has extended a gentle, unhurried welcome. If sleep comes, let it carry you like a river that has always known the way, smoothly, inevitably, into a place where time and weight no longer matter. Healing, the most relaxing facts to fall asleep to, has spent many hours in this territory. The space where the body's oldest repair meets the night. The next hour follows the part of tonight's question that this one didn't have time to finish. That hour is waiting whenever you are ready. But if your eyes are closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, the work of healing will still be there. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, gentle one, and remember, the role of sleep in your recovery is not metaphor. It is the body's most faithful act of care for itself, where science becomes the softest place to rest. Good night.